Hey everyone, welcome to Sips for Change. We have a special feature for you today. I will be chatting with my dear friend about something that we both love most.
Food and beverage.
What's unique about our episode today, besides featuring this aspiring chef and some of her recipes, is that we'll also be discussing tips on how you can make your own recipes in your own kitchen more sustainable and not just catering at your events. I will also like to caveat that I have some notes here, so if I'm looking down, I'm looking at notes. So I'm just gonna be very natural as much as possible, okay? But without further ado, I'd like to welcome Hilda Felicias. She, like I said, is an aspiring chef. Her level currently is a home cook level 2, and her culinary journey started 15 years ago when her sister taught her the basics of food prep and cooking. Hilda enjoys bringing her food to any type of audience and loves to try new things in the kitchen. In her words, cooking for her is like playing jazz. So thank you so much for joining us today.
You are so welcome, and thank you for having me too. I'm very excited.
Of course. I love chatting about food with a fellow foodie any day.
Same, and I'm super excited to be chatting with you specifically about the sustainable foods and recipes today. I made some really fun dishes that we're going to try later. But before we get into the juicy part, no pun intended, let's chat a little bit more about the technical part. I know I've learned a lot about sustainability from you over the years, but incorporating into my cooking is something I just recently started experimenting with. I can imagine that event planners are thinking about the same thing for their events, right?
Indeed. And food and beverage, like we all know, is super important to the events industry. And especially now that we're seeing a lot more dietary restrictions and various clients asking for more socially inclusive as well as environmentally friendly options. And it's definitely becoming more of a standard, and I personally think it's about time.
You know, I've been to many events where there's a lot of food wasted. And if the food isn't composted or disposed of properly, I bet it's really detrimental to the environment when it ends up in the landfills.
Absolutely. So in a June 2023 article, Tracy from Thrive Meetings and Events quoted that the meetings industry actually spends about $64.3 billion annually on food and beverage. If that amount of waste is in sync with the US average of 40%, that's 25.7 billion lost. Wow. So to help put that in perspective, according to a 2019 study done by Lime Venue Portfolio, the food industry wastes about 1.9 million tons of food a year, which is equivalent to the weight of 182 of the HMS Belfast ship. A tribute to our history buffs out there. The HMS Belfast was actually a British naval vessel that supported the Normandy landings in 1944 and is now one of the 3 surviving vessels from D-Day. And it's actually a museum now in London, which you can visit.
That's a crazy amount of food wasted. I read that the Belfast holds about 1,000 people, and it's like a floating city.
Yeah.
That's crazy. To hear that the amount of food wasted is in a year that can fill 182 of those ships is quite eye-opening and a little scary. And that's just the food industry. We're not even talking about the average household, right? When the average household wastes, that number is probably much higher, which is sad. Especially when you remember that according to the UN, an estimate of 2 billion people in the world do not have regular access to safe, nutritious, and sufficient food.
Yeah, it is very sad, which is so crucial why our event planners should be more mindful about how they design their food and beverage experience at their events. And I specifically say food and beverage experience because it's not only about the food that is actually being served. It's also the entire supply chain, the resources in production, the service of the food as well. For instance, single-use plastics used in the food service, the water and energy used in producing the food, plus the carbon emissions from transporting the food, all add onto that food waste itself. So it's no wonder why catering is one of the biggest contributors of an event's carbon footprint.
Okay, before we get too depressing,
Yes,
I would say that I do love that there are so many creative solutions out there. Even when I was just researching ideas for my own recipes. Tammy, why don't you elaborate a bit more on exactly how planners can be more mindful?
of course. An easy way is to swap out your typical buffet with the disposables, and replacing that with a nice plated meal and perhaps using dishware and reusable utensils instead. This will help control the quantity of food being served as well as being wasted. Additionally, caterers can partner with venues from local organizations to compost the food waste and also think about donating unused food and ingredients.
I love that. And I know that here in the U.S. there are some hesitations with food donations due to health and safety concerns, which make that difficult, right?
It does, which is why partnering with local organizations that know how to do that safely is incredibly important.
Wow.
The MGM Resorts in Las Vegas actually did a really good job of this, and they published a case study report. So we're going to share that in the sections below for resources so that you can take a look after the video.
Super cool. Now, let's pivot a bit to some other strategic ways planners can reduce their carbon footprint and their catering.
Yeah, let's talk about food sourcing, because that is something that can help us segue this conversation into the next part of our chat very nicely, since it's something that we can all do in our day-to-day as well. I always suggest people go local and seasonal. It's not only it not only reduces the carbon footprint, but it also supports local farmers and businesses. When you select venues and caterers, you can always include that in your proposal requests as a deciding factor. If you're stuck with a set caterer, then opt for more plant-based options or lower your amount of meats at your in your recipes and menus so that you can consider a lower carbon footprint as well. You can also replace certain meats like chicken over beef because one has less of a footprint than the other.
Yeah, I read that beef has 4 times the carbon footprint of chicken, and about 2 pounds of beef produces the same amount of CO2 as driving 64 miles or 102 kilometers.
Yeah, right? It's also the reason behind why carbon footprint accounts for the entire life cycle of production.
Wow.
For beef, it includes raising the cow, growing the food to feed the cow, the processing of the meat after slaughter, and also transportation, storage, and the energy used to cook it as well. So if you're thinking like 2 ounces of a filet mignon, you can use that same carbon emission to drive up and down the distance of Manhattan like 6 times.
Not factoring the traffic though, right?
Yes, definitely not factoring in traffic. Funny thing, actually idling vehicles actually create more waste because it generates unnecessary CO2 because of the wasted fuel. But anyway, got derailed.
Yes, not that I don't like talking about cars because I love cars, but I did want to get to our tasting. For today's menu, I stayed away from beef and opted for more plant-based ingredients, and specifically because of its footprint.
Yes, plant-based is definitely the future of cuisine. I was actually vegan for almost a year, I think you know that, for
Yes.
health reasons to start, but eventually I also realized that there were so many options out there.
Yes.
So now I don't even buy meat to make meat at home, and people think it's hard to get enough protein on a vegan diet, which, you know, there's stuff like soybeans and soy products such as tofu and tempeh, and as well as legumes, whole grains, nuts, and seeds, all great sources of plant-based protein. There are actually quite a few Olympic athletes that pride themselves on a plant-based diet as well.
I think a lot of plant-based options are great for events, but for people, but for people cooking on a daily basis for their families, like myself,
Yep.
I think some of the options, like Impossible Me, are fairly processed. Granted, its footprint is significantly less than its meat counterpart, but it's not significantly healthier than meat as a substitute.
Yes.
That's why you'll see through my recipes today, and that my recommendation as a chef is still to consider fresh and local ingredients. They take less time to cook, so you'll save on energy costs and emissions, and they just taste as much delicious and healthy.
That's definitely a great point. If you go to an event once a month, you can have Impossible Meat there, and that's fine. But you definitely don't want to be eating Impossible Meat every day if you're cooking at home. And also, to clarify, we're not asking everyone to go vegan and stop eating meat. I don't buy meat or cook meat at home for a lot of different reasons, but I still eat meat at events. And sometimes when I dine out at restaurants, I do still opt for fish or chicken or veggies just to be sustainable. But occasionally, I want the filet mignon.
Yeah, and I understand. I consider that for crafting menus as well. We should always aim for nutritious and a well-balanced meals, both at home and at events.
I want to also mention one last thing, and then we'll get to the special feature of today's episode.
So excited.
On the same wavelength of nutrition, I think we're starting to see people move away from serving and consuming alcohol,
Yeah,
right? Believe
yeah.
it or not, from a water conservation perspective, 16-ounce serving of beer requires almost 20 gallons or 72 liters to produce, and one 5-ounce glass of wine takes about 35 gallons or 132 liters to produce. So it is not just a carbon footprint aspect, but also being mindful of social inclusivity as well. We're always talking about DE&I in our events, but it's probably a good idea to start including mocktails at some of your events and leaning away from serving alcohol, being inclusively minded as well.
That's very true. Socially, you want to make events more welcoming for everyone, right?
Yeah.
Some attendees might feel left out or almost neglected at an event where they're serving alcohol. So the mocktails are a great solution for that. Also, we could take it a step further. Some people might even feel uncomfortable or left out around alcohol, and they'll skip the event altogether if there's a bar. So maybe we could start normalizing dry events and create experiences focused on other fun activations at events.
I definitely agree with you. With that said, a fun activation that you could do at an event could be a chef demonstration, kind of like what Hilda has prepared for us today. So let's pass the spotlight over to Hilda and talk a little bit more about our tastings today.
Yay. Very excited. I'm very excited. I hope I inspire everyone with these recipes. The recipes we're trying today are vegan and they're sustainable. They include in-season produce and they were locally sourced.
Nice. So let's go ahead and segue over to that.
All right, I hope you guys like my recipes. Our first recipe is a vegan cauliflower rice balls. Italian, they're called arancini. Excuse me if I mispronounced that incorrectly. They were made with a vegan cheese, cauliflower, obviously, and they're sitting on top of a homemade pomodoro sauce with some parsley on the top. Excuse me. This is a pretty basic salad, more of a palate cleanser. Arugula, some shallots, some carrots, lemon juice, apple cider vinegar, and some olive oil. Okay.
Nice.
For our little entree, this is a linguine with a asparagus sauce. It has asparagus, garlic, onion, and some olive oil and parsley on top. And finally, for our dessert, it's nestled in a plantain cup, so you can actually eat this as well. These are apples that were sauteed in a vegan bechamel sauce made with honey, cashew milk, almond milk, and a little bit of olive oil.
Awesome. Thank you.
The cauliflower bites.
Okay, let's do that.
Cauliflower rice balls, actually.
Oh my god. This is so good.
Yay!
This is all cauliflower?
All cauliflower. So you needed to take a cauliflower head, cut out the flowerlets, excuse me. Put that in a processor, add garlic, and you let that go. Then you're supposed to take panko breadcrumbs. I actually took whole wheat bread and toasted that up really good. Grinded it up with the same thing with the food processor. Added basil, oregano. It's another ingredient. Basil, oregano, salt, pepper, seasoned salt, sea salt, excuse me. And then I used a new ingredient that I never used before. There were two, nutritional yeast, and also using flaxseed. So that was
Ooh,
another.
okay.
Yeah. So this is very healthy. I mean, from start to finish. I think the most unhealthy thing in here is actually the salt,
Okay.
which wasn't much, by the way.
Definitely really tasty. I've had arancini before, and I know that arancini has a lot of cheese in it, right? So this definitely feels light, very airy, plant-based for sure. Something, I guess, I don't know. I don't know if I can make this at home, but I don't know. But
This was very good. Actually, you're right. The the rice balls. Yeah, I'm right. The rice balls might be someone who kind of knows what they're doing a little more, but the pomodoro sauce. This is an actual tip to be eating at home sustainable. You want to learn how to make your own food and do it in bulk. That's aside from getting produce ingrown and locally.
sorry for our audiences who are not, able to taste this with us, but I will tell you, it tastes great. And you can actually see me on camera eating my food like a crazy person because it's so good. When I say I love food, I'm not kidding. I love and inhale food.
I love food as well, but she actually beats me.
I just eat more than you. Okay.
Yeah, very basic salad. There really wasn't anything special about it.
What'd you say was the dressing again?
Lemon juice, apple cider vinegar, olive oil.
Okay.
A little pepper.
Much better than buying store-bought
Oh,
dressing.
man, yes. And actually, if you really want to do your vinaigrettes at home or dressings at home, highly recommend to get mustard seed. The mustard seed that has its own juices. That is very flavorful, and actually it's also flavorful for chicken as well. But you can make a very decent, well-balanced dressing that's healthy. It takes no more than a few minutes. This is another thing that you could do right on the fly.
For you,
No.
I don't cook. I don't like cooking. But it was really good. And it's so fresh and so light, like you said.
One thing to know about eating sustainable, which, it's more plant-based and stuff like that, you actually feel good after you eat. You don't feel sluggish or like you ate like a hippo,
Or that food coma feeling.
That food coma feeling, thank you. Yes, you feel full, you feel light, you have a lot of flavor in your mouth. I mean, the cauliflower bites, rice balls, between the garlic and the seasoning from the breadcrumbs, I mean, it's like a tapestry of flavors in there. So, this is linguine with an asparagus sauce. Because of how light the asparagus is compared to getting on the pasta, it won't look like a pesto. I take it back. It does look like a pesto, but when you put it on the pasta, it looks like it just has oil or something. But when you try it, you get a nice symphony of flavors that is hitting your tongue. That's
Symphony. You're using wonderful words to describe your food today. I love it.
well, let's make sure. Let's have her take a bite before she's just like, this is nothing.
It is light. I do taste the asparagus.
Yeah.
Yeah, surprisingly.
Asparagus is strong taste.
Yeah, because I'm looking at it, and you're right, because you look like it's just oil based, but definitely taste the asparagus on the pasta, even though you don't see it.
Yes. I think for next time you can consider adding one, asparagus also is an in-season food, and two, I think adding some spinach can make it greenier and make it look like it's actually on it.
I'm sorry I'm jumping straight to dessert because I want to be mindful of letting these people go.
Of course.
I'm not like waiting.
No,
for,
no, of
follow me
course.
while I eat my full meal here. But yeah, I'm gonna try Can I try this separately?
It is plain. I didn't want to.
Oh, it is plain, yeah.
Yeah, it's very plain. It's actually meant to be eaten together.
Okay.
So try that and let's see. This was actually a new recipe that I specifically created on my own.
What is? I'm sorry. I know you explained it earlier.
No worries.
But I don't remember. It's apples and it's a plantain crust.
Yes.
Mm.
And the apples are bathed in a vegan sweetened bechamel sauce. If you don't know what that is, you can think of it like a light pudding, if you will. And I added honey to make it a little bit more sweeter, a little bit of brown sugar. I didn't want to go too heavy on the brown sugar.
I know sweetness is perfect.
Yeah, I use more honey more than anything. And I first boiled the plantains, and then I mashed it up. I use a cupcake holder, flip it on the back, right? Spray it so it doesn't stick. And then I molded the cup around it there, right? Baked it in for like 20 minutes at 350, no big deal. So by the time the bechamel sauce, it was a nice pairing. This can be eaten warm or hot.
I hope you enjoyed our special feature. Thank you for joining us and making these lovely dishes. So tasty. We'll save you guys the trouble of watching us eat for the rest of the meal. But definitely, when you do launch your food blog or your food vlog, let us know. We'll tag you and we'll link out from here so that you can have access to Hilda's future recipes and be able to follow her there. But thank you again. I hope this gives you guys a good insight into sustainable foods, both at home and also at your events. And make sure to click subscribe for future special features like this one today. And we're definitely going to try to do more of these. But thank you all so much, and we'll sip with you again soon.